Hi Guy, how are you today? Welcome back TV spoilers. Victor and Nick were walking into the same war, but they were not walking in with the same faith. On the surface, their goal was simple and brutally clear: set a trap tight enough to pull Matt into exactly the position they needed, force him to return Sienna Bacall unharmed, and end this nightmare before it grew teeth. Yet beneath that surface, their alliance felt like a temporary ceasefire between two opposing ways of seeing the world. Victor treated this as a problem of power, where control had to be absolute, information had to be locked down, and an enemy had to be crushed before he even realized he was losing. Nick stepped into the plan with a knot cinched around his ribs, guilt for the old cracks that had once allowed Matt back into their lives, rage that refused to settle while Sienna remained somewhere beyond reach, and fear that leaked into every decision even when he tried to hide it. Fear that one wrong beat would not cost reputation or money but a human being. That was why Nick's offer of $1 million was never just a number. It was a confession that he would bargain with anything, even his pride, if it meant Sienna came back intact. And when Matt answered with something colder, did not simply want the money. He wanted it wired to an offshore account after he had left the country. Nick understood immediately that they were facing a mind that didn't improvise, it engineered outcomes. Matt wasn't rushing. Matt was building an exit. Matt didn't just want to win, he wanted a victory no one could trace, reclaim, or touch. That demand pushed the situation beyond the shape of an exchange and turned it into a declaration. Matt believed he could walk out of the United States with the cash secured and leave the Newmans staring at the humiliation of having been led around like puppets. In that air, Victor recognized that every old argument between him and Nick had become irrelevant, at least for this moment. They could disagree about how to live, how to love, how to protect a family, but they shared one hard truth about Genoa City: when someone puts their hands on one of yours, you don't get the luxury of hesitation. That was why the secret meeting in Victor's safe room wasn't merely a conversation. It was a ritual of sealing the outside world away, sealing away the excess emotion, until only one thing was permitted to exist: the plan. Victor's safe room had always been a symbol of Newman power, a space designed so no one could listen, no one could intrude, no one could reach the core of what mattered. Tonight, it became something else as well, a monument to compressed anxiety. Because the more secrecy they needed, the more it proved how frightened they were of Matt catching even a single fragment. Victor entered with his familiar calm, the calm of a man who had lived long enough to know that panic is the richest gift you can hand a predator. Nick entered with a strange restraint, as if he were forcing his heart to beat to the tempo of logic. They didn't need many words to understand each other. One look was enough. This was not the hour for father and son to demand fairness from each other. This was the hour to measure who could stay cold long enough to save the person they couldn't bear to lose. They built the trap out of what Matt believed was his advantage: greed, and the arrogance that comes from thinking you've outsmarted everyone in the room. Victor saw that weakness as clearly as a fingerprint on glass. A man who is too certain always believes he controls the game to the last second. And that belief is what makes him take one extra step he assumes is safe, but is actually the step into the noose. They agreed to pretend to comply with the ransom terms, not because they were accepting being dragged by the throat, but because they needed to create a perfect illusion that Matt was winning. Inside that illusion, Matt would behave like a victor. He would expand his ambition, loosen his caution, and treat risk as something that belonged to other people. And the moment he believed everything was moving on the track he had drawn one, he decided Victor was only an aging titan cornered into surrender. When he decided Nick was a desperate man willing to throw money at piece of trap would close. The center of the plan was the ransom money. $1 million stopped being currency and became a lure engineered with precision. They would embed a tracking device into the cash, not something crude, not the kind of obvious marker that would flash danger to a paranoid mind, but something designed to vanish into the process of transport itself, to exist like a ghost riding the money's path. Control began to return to Victor as the details sharpened into shape. The money would be prepared, exactly as Matt demanded. The procedure staged so convincingly that even an outsider would believe Victor had given in. But for Nick, that same clarity sharpened the cost. Their plan depended on a single fragile assumption that Matt would not detect the trap. And with someone as calculating as Matt, detection doesn't require a dramatic mistake. It can be born from a microscopic irregularity, a single detail that doesn't match the rhythm, a vague alarm in the gut that tells him something is off. That was why, alongside the tracker, Victor prepared a covert team to tail Matt from a distance. No one spoke the team's name out loud, but in both Victor's and Nick's minds it existed as the final layer of insurance seed layer. They prayed they would not need in the worst possible way. Watching from a distance meant not cornering Matt too early, not making him feel hunted at the start. They wanted him to walk confidently, to believe he was the one setting the route. And while Matt moved, the team would move behind him like a shadow. At this point, the difference between Victor and Nick revealed itself again in their goal. But in their obsession, Victor was obsessed with sealing every possible exit, turning Matt into prey inside a tightening cage. Nick was obsessed with Sienna coming back unharmed when everything ended. Same plan, different engines. And that difference made the safe room feel less safe psychologically. It hid the strategy, yes, but it also forced Nick to admit a truth he hated. He was placing trust in a father he had fought. Because beyond Victor there might be no one ruthless enough to beat Matt on the same board. Nick insisted on the element that could decide whether the plan lived or died: absolute secrecy. Even from Sharon. It was not a choice that sat easily in his chest, and the difficulty of it exposed his inner conflict. Sharon wasn't just someone in his life, she was a living bridge to the past. The person who understood best how an old ghost could return, and turned the present into a private hell. But precisely because of that, Sharon could become the most dangerous point of leakage. Not because she would betray him, but because love and fear can force a person into instinct, seeking help, asking questions, making calls, or simply revealing a subtle shift in behavior that someone like Matt could notice. Nick understood that in this game, Matt didn't need to hear the whole plan. He only needed to smell a change. And once he smelled it, he would weaponize it. So Nick chose the smaller cruelty to prevent the larger one. He would lie by omission to Sharon to save Sienna, even though the guilt would sink its teeth into their relationship later. Victor didn't argue. He understood the logic the way he understood every rule of war. But for a brief moment, beneath the calculations, something unspoken hung in the air. Victor understood that secrecy wasn't only meant to catch Matt, it also kept Nick inside Victor's orbit. If Nick was pulled into a plan whose full skeleton only Victor held, then Nick would be forced to move to Victor's tempo. That was how Victor operated: rescue the family and at the same time reinforce control. Nick felt that shadow stretch over his shoulders. He hated being steered, hated placing Sienna's fate into a structure he couldn't fully see. But he also knew that without Victor, he would be nothing more than a desperate man handing cash to Matt and begging the universe for mercy. When the meeting ended, the plan stood between them like a silent contract. They would pretend to agree. They would deliver the money. They would track. They would keep it sealed. On paper, it sounded clean, like a straight road to victory. But the air could not lighten because one question kept circling in Nick's mind. Like knuckles tapping on glass, with someone as scheming as Matt, could they really outplay him so easily? The question wasn't pessimism. It was a warning. It reminded Nick that Matt wasn't merely greedy. Matt was patient. Matt had demanded an offshore transfer after leaving the country, proof that he always thought one step further. If he had planned an exit route, he had likely also planned for the possibility of a trap. And if he had planned for that possibility, he would have prepared a way to turn Victor's trap into a trap of his own. Nick left the safe room feeling as though he was carrying a timed explosive in his chest. Every move would have to be flawless, not because Victor demanded a win, but because a single error would not hurt Victor first, it would hurt Sienna. Victor left with his familiar composure, but even he understood when the opponent is Matt. Composure is not certainty, it is armor. And somewhere beyond their sight, Matt still held the advantage in the only way he needed. He believed he had already read them. They called this plan their one chance to end Matt once and for all. But the fact that it was their only chance made it fragile. When you have only one shot, you hear your heartbeat inside every silence. And every shadow looks capable of being the enemy. Nick understood that as he thought of Sharon Simeone he was choosing to keep in the dark. Someone who might sense the shift even if he said nothing. Victor understood it as he wondered whether Matt was simply waiting for the exact moment they felt most confident to strike. And the tension didn't come only from Matt. It also came from the truth that Victor and Nick were walking together, without fully trusting each other. Hook, just as they prepared to move into the execution phase when the ransom money was finally ready to become the perfect bait, a small detail in Matt's wording hit Nick like a splinter of glass. Matt didn't just want the offshore transfer after he left the country. He wanted it after he was already gone. As if he were certain he would leave safely, and that certainty sounded like the signature of someone running a second plan in parallel, a plan Victor and Nick had not even begun to see. The audience has been watching Matt's war against the Newmans like a fracture that runs through generations, not a single contained threat. but something that resurfaces the moment everyone dares to believe. The past has been buried deep enough to stay buried. In Genoa City's current atmosphere where every victory can become tomorrow's trap, viewers' exhaustion mirrors the Newman family's own. They are worn down not because Matt is loud, but because he is relentless. The predictions circulating on twists that Matt may soon leave Y&R might tempt people to hope for a clean, simple ending. But hope like that is a luxury the Newmans no longer allow themselves. They understand one brutal truth: if Matt leaves on his terms, if he slips away like a shadow beyond their reach, that won't be an ending, it will be the beginning of a new cycle. And a more dangerous one. Because next time he returns, he will return with the confidence of someone who escaped once. And with the learned certainty that the Newmans can be forced into compromise. That is why the Newman family knows they cannot let Matt get away, not out of pride, but out of survival. None of them wants to live with the fear that Matt could come back and unleash even more damage. That fear isn't the kind that explodes into screams, it is the kind that smolders, creeping into daily decisions, twisting choices that should be simple, turning every late-night phone call into an alarm bell. It poisons ordinary moments: a strange glance, a door closing too hard, a text arriving a few minutes later than expected. Any of it can make a heart stutter. The Newmans are no strangers to enemies. But Matt is different because he doesn't just want to win a round. He wants to leave a curse behind. He wants them living to his rhythm, losing the sensation of freedom inside the very home they have always believed was untouchable. And the crushing weight of being forced to exist in that kind of vigilance drives them toward a single, cold conclusion: they must end this now. Deep down, they no longer debate whether Matt might cause more harm. They debate the scale of the harm and who will be pulled under first when he strikes again. That is what tightens the air around the Newman family, until it feels like a wire stretched to snapping. When a family that has lived on the summit of power is attacked, the pain is not only the attack itself, it is the dawning realization that power cannot shield them from everything. They can buy silence, lawyers, time, distance, but they cannot buy certainty that Matt will stop. And when certainty disappears, power becomes heavy. It demands decisions. It demands action. It demands options they would normally refuse to consider. Not everyone carries the same threshold for that darkness. Not everyone can look directly at the truth that cutting off a shadow like Matt might require crossing moral lines they once believed would never be negotiable. That is why their goal sharpens into something ruthless enough to sound like a vow. You can't take back whether Matt ends up in prison or in the ground. The only thing that matters is stopping him permanently. If those words were spoken aloud, they would chill the room, not only because of their extremity, but because they expose the desperation underneath. When a family reaches the point where they are willing to accept any ending as long as it is final, it means they have been pushed to the edge. That is where Victor and Nick are standing, each in his own way. Victor is not new to cold choices. His entire life has been built on the belief that the strong survive by controlling the board. Nick can be hard, but he is haunted by something Victor has always treated like weakness: emotion. Nick doesn't only want Matt neutralized. Nick wants the ending to not demand a loss he cannot live with. And that difference makes this war more dangerous. Because it is not only Newman versus Matt, it is Newman versus the slow unraveling inside the family itself, born from the fact that each of them carries fear differently. In that pressure, Nick and Victor become two forces that must pull closer whether they like it or not. They have clashed before, bruised each other with old wounds, disappointed each other in ways they don't even always name. But in the face of Matt, every private conflict is forced down into the background. Not because it disappears, but because it loses the right to be first. When the opponent is a schemer who waits, who turns a tiny mistake into a catastrophe, division becomes the most dangerous gift they could hand him. Victor understands that as instinct. Nick understands it too, but his understanding comes with bitterness. He hates needing Victor's methods. He hates stepping into the darker territory where everything is calculated like war. And yet, because Matt will absolutely have tricks of his own, Nick has no choice but to accept an alliance he knows will cost him laterally, emotionally, relationally. The cunning plan to corner Matt is, on the surface, a story of tactics. But underneath, it is a story of endurance, enduring the patience required when your instincts demand you strike. Enduring silence when your heart wants to speak. Enduring trust in someone you do not fully trust. Victor brings what he always brings: structure, control, cold precision. He looks at Matt like a variable that must be removed from the system. Nick looks at Matt like a hook lodged in his life, every attempt to pull it out tears more flesh. And every tug reminds Nick he may lose more than he can afford. That is why Nick cannot tolerate the idea of Matt leaving by escaping. Escape means return. Escape means fear that never ends. Escape means the family remains hostage to its own past. The tension only rises as they acknowledge a simple, terrifying fact: Matt is not the kind of enemy who merely reacts. He is the kind who creates the battlefield. If Nick and Victor are drawing a trap to corner him, then Matt is almost certainly designing a way to turn that corner into his stage. He can weaponize Victor's confidence, Nick's intensity, and the exhaustion settling into the bones of the entire family. He can hide a trap inside their trap, force them into moments that demand rushed decisions, then use those decisions to flip the story and paint them as the ones who crossed the line. The cruelest part is that the Newmans know this and they still have to move, because standing still is losing. When you face someone who never stops, you only have two options: cut him off, or accept being controlled forever. That is why the determination to not let Matt slip away becomes the only glue holding them together right now. It pushes past ego, resentment, distrust. It turns the Newman family into a single unit even as cracks remain inside that unit. And those cracks are not harmless, because Matt is exactly the kind of enemy who pokes at fractures until they split. He will jab at the father-son tension between Victor and Nick, at the clash between tactics and emotion, at the war between doing what is right and doing what is necessary. Matt does not need to destroy them with brute force. He only needs to make them destroy themselves. That is what makes the air so suffocating. This is not only a chase between hunter and prey, but a chase between reason and fear, between control and desperation. Inside that suffocation, Nick feels the price of ending it now most sharply. He carries not only the pressure of a plan, but the pressure of expectation, his family's, the viewers, his own, that this time must be the last time. But the last time is a curse if you speak it too soon. It changes fear into something sharper, not only fear of consequences, but fear of the humiliation of admitting Matt can still return. Victor sees it as a board that cannot end in a draw. To Victor, a draw is losing control. And because Victor does not allow a draw, he also does not allow Nick the comfort of softness. That difference creates an invisible strain inside their cooperation. Victor wants to move by optimal logic, Nick wants to move by protective logic. Those two logics can coexist, but if Matt pushes one moment to the extreme, they can collide like blades. And Matt, wherever he is, remains the source of every unstable breath. His presence hangs like a dark shape over the family, forcing an unspoken question into every glance: who will break first? Not everyone breaks the same way. Some break into panic. Some break into a coldness that turns ruthless. Some break into silence that lasts too long. And in a war that drags on, breaking does not always mean collapse. Sometimes breaking is transformation into a version of yourself you no longer recognize. That is what makes the goal of ending it now both urgent and terrifying. To end it, they may have to become what they once despised in Matt: a strategist who calculates without mercy, someone who places outcome above everything else. No one says it out loud, but everyone understands it. If Matt truly is on the verge of leaving Y&R, the Newmans cannot allow him to disappear in a way that leaves no trace. An open-ended exit for Matt is an open door for fear, and none of them can live like that any longer. They want that door sealed with a hard click of a lock, not held shut by fragile promises. They want a period, not a comma. That is why Victor and Nick will work together to craft a trap that corners Matt, even as they both know that cunning may not be enough. Because Matt is not stupid enough to step into a trap out of greed alone. If he steps in, it will be because he believes he can step back out. And if he believes that, then he has already prepared an escape route that could be hidden inside Victor's confidence, inside Nick's determination, inside the exhaustion of a family that has been fighting too long. Hook, just when Victor and Nick start to believe they have seized enough control to ensure Matt cannot slip away, a single icy thought hits Nick with sudden force. If Matt is truly preparing to leave the way Twists predicts, then who gave him the certainty he would leave safely? And could that certainty be the warning sign that Matt is guiding them toward a different trap? One where the person with no exit left at the end won't be him, but the Newman family itself. On our TV Spoilers channel, I'm always looking for content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.